Everything that I had, I got from looking in their eyes, and for the great love they gave me for 5 months, I thank Kevin Kline and Peter McNichol.
For nearly 5 decades, Meryl Streep built something extraordinary in Hollywood. Not just a career, not just awards. She built a reputation so flawless, so untouchable, that people assumed she had no enemies. They were wrong. Behind the grace, behind the perfect interviews, behind the standing ovations, there were battles. Real ones. Some fought with words, some with silence.
Tonight we saw Meryl Streep talking about playing former British Prime Minister Margaret Thatcher in the new movie called The Iron Lady.
We were shooting in a trailer in Weirton, West Virginia. Vilmos Zsigmond, the cinematographer, had stripped down to his...
And one crossed a line that would haunt an entire industry for generations. This is the story Hollywood never wanted you to hear. The image Meryl Streep protected for 50 years. Before getting into the conflicts, you need to understand something crucial about Meryl Streep. She is not just an actress. She is arguably the most decorated performer in the history of American cinema. 21 Academy Award nominations, more than any actor or actress who has ever lived. 3 Oscar wins, 9 Golden Globes. A career spanning half a century with virtually no missteps. But what makes Streep truly remarkable is not the awards, it is the image. For nearly 50 years, she maintained a public persona that seemed almost impossible in Hollywood. No scandals, no public feuds, no messy divorces splashed across tabloids. While other stars of her generation battled addiction, ego, and each other in full view of the press, Streep remained untouchable. She became known for her discipline. Her preparation was legendary. For Sophie's Choice, she learned to speak Polish with a specific regional accent. For The Iron Lady, she studied Margaret Thatcher's speech patterns so obsessively that even Thatcher's own staff found it unsettling. For The Devil Wears Prada, she created an entire backstory for Miranda Priestly that never appeared in the script, but informed every single glance, every pause, every devastating silence. This was not just talent, this was architecture. Every role was built from the ground up with a precision that bordered on obsession. And that same precision extended to her public life. She chose her words carefully. She navigated interviews with the grace of a diplomat. She praised fellow actors generously and rarely, if ever, spoke ill of anyone. But here is what people did not understand. That silence was not peace. It was strategy. Because behind closed doors, Meryl Streep had opinions, strong ones. And when certain lines were crossed, she did not forget. She watched colleagues implode. She saw careers destroyed by single interviews, by careless comments, by feuds that became bigger than the work itself. She understood that Hollywood memory is selective. Achievement fades, controversy endures. So she chose to let her work speak while keeping her battles private. Until now. Because what we are about to explore is not gossip. It is not tabloid speculation. These are documented conflicts, verified through interviews, eyewitness accounts, and in some cases, admissions from the other parties themselves. This is the history that has been hiding in plain sight. The first name on that list would expose a battle between 2 completely different philosophies of acting. And it happened on a film that audiences assumed was all laughter and light. Alec Baldwin and the Battle of Control. The year was 2009. Nancy Meyers was directing a romantic comedy called It's Complicated. The cast was a dream. Meryl Streep, Alec Baldwin, Steve Martin. On paper, it should have been effortless. 3 of the most charming performers in Hollywood making a light, funny film about love and second chances. But even before cameras rolled, there was a fundamental difference in how Streep and Baldwin approached their craft. Streep believes in meticulous preparation. She arrives on set having done months of research. She knows her character's history, psychology, and motivation for every single line. She rehearses extensively and expects her scene partners to meet her at that level. Baldwin operates differently. He is a believer in spontaneity. He trusts his instincts. He likes to play with the material, improvise, Find moments in real time that could not have been planned. For many actors, this approach creates magic. Robin Williams worked this way. So did Gene Wilder. The unexpected can be electric, but for Streep, it was chaos. According to crew members who worked on the film, the tension was subtle but unmistakable. Streep would arrive, having built her performance beat by beat. She knew exactly where the emotional peaks and valleys were. She had timed her reactions, her pauses, her shifts in tone. And then Baldwin would change his lines mid-scene. For someone like Streep, this was not creativity, it was sabotage. Her carefully constructed emotional architecture would collapse because the foundation had shifted without warning. Rehearsals became tense. The ease that audiences saw on screen was manufactured in the editing room. Now, here is where it gets interesting. Baldwin has spoken publicly about working with Streep. He called her extraordinary. He said it was a dream come true. He posted on Instagram years later, calling the experience wonderful. Streep said almost nothing. In Hollywood, where press tours demand endless mutual admiration, where actors are contractually required to praise each other in interviews and on social media, where the appearance of camaraderie is worth millions in marketing value, silence becomes its own statement. It is the one response that publicists cannot spin. It is the absence that everyone notices, but no one can challenge. And in the world of Hollywood press tours, where actors are contractually obligated to praise each other endlessly, silence speaks volumes. The two have never worked together again. Projects that could have reunited them never materialized. The door quietly closed and stayed closed. But if Baldwin represented creative differences, what came next was something far more personal: Kevin Kline and the cost of disrespect. To understand this conflict, you need to understand what Sophie's Choice meant to Meryl Streep. It was not just a role, it was a transformation so complete, so devastating, that it fundamentally changed how the industry viewed acting itself. The film required Streep to play Sophie, a Polish Holocaust survivor carrying an impossible secret. The performance demanded fluency in Polish with a specific Galician accent. It required German with a Polish accent. It required her to embody trauma so deep that even watching it decades later leaves audiences shattered. Streep spent months in preparation. She worked with dialect coaches. She read survivor testimonies. She visited concentration camp sites. She did not just learn the accent. She learned to think in Polish so that the language would feel native, not performed. Kevin Kline played Nathan, Sophie's troubled lover. He was a relatively new film actor at the time, coming primarily from stage work, and his approach was different. He believed in instinct over research. He trusted his natural talent to carry him through. During production, Kline reportedly questioned whether audiences would even notice Streep's linguistic preparation. He wondered aloud if all that work on accents and dialects actually mattered, when most viewers could not tell the difference anyway. For Streep, this was not just disagreement. This was an attack on everything she believed about the craft. Her preparation was not ego. It was respect. Respect for the material. Respect for the real survivors whose stories she was telling. Respect for the art form itself. In later interviews, Kline described Streep's method as academic. He meant it as observation, not insult, but the word landed differently. Academic implied her work was intellectual rather than emotional, studied rather than felt. For an actress who poured her soul into every role, it was dismissive in the worst possible way. Professionally, they finished the film. Both received acclaim. Streep won her second Oscar, but the relationship never recovered. In the 40 years since Sophie's Choice, despite both remaining active in the industry, despite both being considered among the finest actors of their generation, they have rarely crossed paths professionally. Trust, once broken, does not repair easily. And for Streep, Kline's dismissal of her process was a betrayal she quietly but permanently remembered. What makes this particularly painful is that Kline was not wrong to have a different approach. Many great actors work from instinct. Many find their characters through spontaneity rather than research. The problem was not disagreement. The problem was dismissal. To call her work academic was to suggest it lacked heart, and Streep poured more heart into her work than perhaps any performer of her generation. But the next conflict would not happen on any set. It would unfold in the back rooms of Hollywood power, Jack Nicholson and the silent Cold War. Jack Nicholson is Hollywood royalty. 3 Academy Awards, 12 nominations. A persona so iconic that his sunglasses and wolfish grin became symbols of American cinema itself. He dominated the 1970s and 1980s with performances that redefined what leading men could be. For decades, studios dreamed of pairing Nicholson with Streep. On paper, it was the ultimate combination. The greatest actor of his generation opposite the greatest actress. Box office gold guaranteed. They actually did work together. Twice. Heartburn in 1986 and Ironweed in 1987. Both films were critically respected, but commercially modest. And then something interesting happened. Nothing. For the next 35 years, despite remaining the 2 most sought-after dramatic actors in Hollywood, they never shared a screen again. Projects were proposed. Scripts were developed. Studios threw money at the possibility. Nothing materialized. Here is what we know. Nicholson has always been public about his approach to acting. He believes in natural talent over technical preparation. He has mocked the obsessive research that actors like Streep undertake. In interviews, he has suggested that over-preparation can actually harm a performance by making it too calculated, too mechanical. For Streep, whose entire career is built on that very preparation, this was philosophical heresy. She views her research as essential, not optional. It is how she finds truth in characters. It is how she honors the stories she tells. Industry insiders have long suggested that Streep quietly vetoed projects involving Nicholson. No public statements, no dramatic confrontations, just a name that kept appearing on lists of potential co-stars and then quietly disappearing when the casting was finalized. Nicholson, for his part, has spoken admiringly of Streep in interviews. He called her extraordinary. He expressed excitement about working with her on Heartburn, but the warmth was not reciprocated in any documented way. This is how wars are fought in Hollywood. Not with press releases, not with public accusations, with scheduling conflicts, creative differences, projects that somehow never quite come together. The battlefield is invisible, but the casualties are real. What we will never know is what masterpieces we lost. Imagine a Streep and Nicholson drama, directed by someone like Mike Nichols or Sidney Pollack, the combustion of her emotional intensity against his dangerous charm. The scripts that must have been written with exactly that pairing in mind. All of it dissolved into the quiet space between 2 actors who simply would not share a frame. But the conflict that would define everything was still to come, and it would involve something far worse than philosophical disagreement. Dustin Hoffman and the line that was crossed. This is the CE conflict that changes everything. Because what happened between Meryl Streep and Dustin Hoffman on the set of Kramer vs. Kramer was not a difference of opinion. It was not creative tension. It was violation. The year was 1979. Streep was 29 years old. She had just lost the love of her life. John Cazale, her boyfriend of 2 years, had died of lung cancer just months before filming began. She was grieving, vulnerable, and about to work with one of the most intense method actors in Hollywood history. Dustin Hoffman believed in extreme method acting. He did not just play characters, he became them. And he expected everyone around him to participate in that process, whether they consented or not. On the second day of filming, during the very first scene Streep would shoot for the movie, Hoffman walked up to her in the hallway. No warning, no discussion. He slapped her hard across the face. Try to imagine that moment. A young actress, still grieving the death of her partner, standing on a film set surrounded by cameras and crew. She is about to shoot her first significant scene in a major motion picture. Her career hangs in the balance, and a man with more power, more experience, more industry protection walks up and strikes her. The slap was real. It was not staged. It was not rehearsed. It left visible marks on her face. Streep addressed this directly in a 2018 interview with the New York Times. Her words were precise and measured. She said it was her first movie and her first take in her first movie. He just slapped her. She could see it in the film. And then she said the words that defined her view of what happened. It was overstepping. Director Robert Benton's reaction, documented in Michael Schulman's biography of Streep, was immediate panic. He thought the picture was dead. He expected Streep to report them to the Screen Actors Guild. She did not. She was 29. It was her first major film role, and the industry operated very differently in 1979. But the slap was not the only incident. According to producer Richard Fishoff, who spoke to Vanity Fair in 2016, Hoffman used even more disturbing tactics to provoke emotional responses from Streep. He would goad her and provoke her, using information he knew about her personal life and about John Cazale to get the response he thought she should be giving in the performance. Let that sink in. Hoffman reportedly whispered the name of her dead boyfriend in her ear before emotionally demanding scenes. He exploited her grief as a performance tool. There was also the wine glass incident. Hoffman himself admitted this in a 1982 interview with the Washington Post. During an argument scene, he yelled at Streep to stop carrying the flag for feminism and just act the scene. Then he threw a wine glass against the wall near her head. Glass shattered into her hair. Her response, as Hoffman recalled it, "Next time you do that, I would appreciate you letting me know." The film was a massive success. Both won Academy Awards. In her acceptance speech, Streep thanked Hoffman first. She was gracious in public because that was how the game was played. But her private view evolved over decades. In 2011, she told CBS News that while Hoffman was very gifted, Kramer vs. Kramer was not the most fun she ever had on film. By 2020, she stated clearly that the slap was wrong. They never worked together again. Think about what that means. Hoffman and Streep were the two most acclaimed dramatic actors in Hollywood throughout the 1980s. Studios would have paid fortunes to reunite them. Scripts were undoubtedly written with both in mind. And yet, for 45 years, nothing. No second collaboration, no reunion project, no joint appearance celebrating the film that made them both Oscar winners. The reason is obvious. What Hoffman did was not artistic. It was assault. And Streep, despite being denied the language and framework to call it what it was in 1979, never forgot. What Hoffman did would be career-ending today. In 1979, it won awards. That reality says everything about how the industry protected certain men and failed certain women for generations. But after the violence, the next conflict would come from an entirely different place. It would not be about method acting or creative differences. It would be about something Streep valued just as much: earning your place. Gwyneth Paltrow and the Privilege Divide. It was March 21, 1999. The Dorothy Chandler Pavilion in Los Angeles. The Academy Awards ceremony that would spark one of the most debated Best Actress races in Oscar history. The nominees included Meryl Streep for One True Thing, a devastating performance as a mother dying of cancer. It required her to physically transform, losing weight, and embodying the slow deterioration of terminal illness. Critics called it one of her finest performances. Also nominated was Gwyneth Paltrow for Shakespeare in Love, a charming, lighter performance in a romantic comedy, beautifully executed but not in the same weight class of difficulty. Paltrow won. The decision was controversial at the time and remains debated to this day. Shakespeare in Love had the full weight of Miramax's awards campaign behind it. Harvey Weinstein, before his later exposure, was notorious for his aggressive Oscar lobbying. Money, advertising, and relentless promotion had arguably swung the vote. Now, upset victories happen at the Oscars. That alone would not create tension. But the narrative surrounding Paltrow's career was something that fundamentally clashed with everything Streep believed about the craft. Gwyneth Paltrow is Hollywood royalty by birth. Her mother is Blythe Danner, an acclaimed actress. Her father was Bruce Paltrow, a powerful producer and director. Her godfather is Steven Spielberg. She grew up attending premieres, knowing studio executives by their first names, having access that most aspiring actors could never dream of. Meryl Streep came from Summit, New Jersey. Her father was a pharmaceutical executive. Her mother was a commercial artist. She had no connections to Hollywood. Every door she walked through, she had to kick open herself. For Streep, success meant years of training. Yale School of Drama, regional theater, character roles before leading roles, a slow, deliberate climb built on undeniable skill. She did not network her way to the top. She performed her way there. Paltrow's rise looked different. It looked effortless. Whether or not that perception was fair, it was the perception. And for someone who valued struggle and earning your place, that effortlessness was difficult to respect. In her Oscar acceptance speech, Paltrow was gracious. She called Streep the greatest one who ever was. She said she did not feel very deserving of the award in Streep's presence. The compliment was genuine. But watch Streep in that audience. Her face is polite, professional, and completely unreadable. In the years since, Streep has praised many actresses publicly. She has championed younger performers. She has used her platform to elevate voices that deserve elevation. But if you search for quotes of Streep praising Paltrow specifically, you will find very little. They are actually neighbors in New York. Paltrow has told stories about Streep coming over to use her oven when her own broke on Thanksgiving. The relationship is cordial, but cordial is not warm, and warm is not respect. For Streep, the divide was never really about Paltrow personally. It was about what her success represented. In an industry that already favored connections over talent, rewarding inherited access felt like a betrayal of everyone who had fought their way up from nothing. But the final conflict would come from someone who should have understood Streep completely, someone who shared her classical training, her commitment to craft, her respect for the art form, and somehow that made the fracture even more painful. Jeremy Irons and the final fracture. Jeremy Irons and Meryl Streep should have been perfect collaborators. Both were classically trained. Both came from respected theater backgrounds. Both approached acting as serious artistic endeavor rather than celebrity performance. Both won Academy Awards. Both were considered among the finest performers of their generation. They worked together on The French Lieutenant's Woman in 1981, early in both their film careers. The production went smoothly. Reviews were strong. And then they reunited for The House of the Spirits in 1993. On paper, nothing went wrong. Irons has spoken glowingly of Streep in interviews. He called her the most generous and extraordinarily gifted actress. He said she taught him something important about the craft. He actively recruited her for their second film together. But here is where it gets complicated. Irons and Streep have fundamentally different philosophies about what makes a great performance. Streep believes in emotional excavation. She digs into characters, finding their psychological wounds and bringing those wounds to the surface. Her performances are raw, exposed, vulnerable. Irons believes in restraint, control, polish. He delivers performances that are technically perfect, but often emotionally contained. The audience has to work to access the character's interior life. Neither approach is wrong. Both have produced masterpieces. But when two actors with opposing philosophies share a scene, the results can feel dissonant, like two musicians playing in different keys. Crew members on their films noted a certain distance, not hostility, not tension, just two performers occupying completely different creative spaces. Their scenes together felt technically accomplished, but emotionally disconnected. The chemistry that should have existed between two actors of their caliber simply was not there. What reportedly deepened the divide was Irons questioning Streep's famous focus on accents and technical detail. For Streep, that preparation was the foundation of everything. It was how she found her way into characters. Having a fellow classically trained actor dismiss it as unnecessary was unexpected and unwelcome. Irons has publicly discussed genuine conflicts with other actors. He described terrible rows with Robert De Niro during The Mission. He has been candid about creative disagreements throughout his career, but he has never mentioned any friction with Streep. And Streep has said nothing about Irons at all. That silence, again, speaks volumes. After The House of the Spirits in 1993, they never worked together again. 30 years in the same industry, both still active, both still at the top of their field, and no third collaboration. Some fractures are loud, some are quiet. The quiet ones often hurt more. What makes the Irons situation particularly tragic is the potential that was never realized. Two classically trained actors at the peak of their powers. Two performers capable of the kind of subtle, layered work that rarely gets made in mainstream cinema. They should have been allies. They should have championed each other. Instead, creative philosophy created a gap that professional respect could not bridge. But at least with Irons, the divide was purely artistic. What came next would show what happens when Meryl Streep is attacked, not for her craft, but for her integrity. Karl Lagerfeld and the public war. Every conflict we have discussed so far happened behind closed doors. The public saw professionalism while the battles raged in private. But in 2017, just days before Meryl Streep was set to attend the Academy Awards with her record-breaking 20th nomination, everything changed. The war went public. Karl Lagerfeld was one of the most powerful figures in fashion. As creative director of Chanel, his influence extended far beyond clothing into the very definition of taste, elegance, and cultural status. When celebrities needed to make a statement on a red carpet, they came to Karl. Streep's team had approached Chanel about creating a custom gown for the 2017 Oscars. This was standard practice in Hollywood. Major designers competed for the opportunity to dress A-list stars at awards ceremonies. The exposure was invaluable. According to Lagerfeld, Chanel began making the dress, and then Streep's team called with a different message. Do not continue the dress. We found somebody who will pay us. Lagerfeld went to the press. He told Women's Wear Daily that Streep was a genius actress, but cheapness also. He accused her of demanding payment from another designer rather than accepting Chanel's free $105,000 custom gown. In Hollywood, where public accusations are carefully managed and feuds are fought through publicists, this was a grenade. A direct public attack from one of the most powerful figures in global fashion against one of the most respected actresses in film history. Streep did not stay silent. For 50 years, she had absorbed criticism, handled conflicts privately, chosen diplomacy over confrontation. But this was different. Lagerfeld had not just criticized her performance or her choices, he had attacked her character. He had called her cheap. He had accused her of accepting bribes. He had tried to embarrass her on the eve of her greatest professional recognition. This time, the gloves came off. Her official response was devastating. She called it defamation. She said Karl Lagerfeld, a prominent designer, defamed her, her stylist, and the illustrious designer whose dress she chose to wear. Then came the killing blow. He lied. They printed the lie, and she was still waiting for an apology. Her representative added that Streep would never wear anything in exchange for payment. The accusation was not just insulting, it was false. Lagerfeld issued what he called a retraction. He claimed he misunderstood. Streep rejected it completely. She said it was not an apology, and she walked the Oscar red carpet in Elie Saab Couture, not Chanel. This was the only time in 50 years that Meryl Streep publicly went to war. She chose her battlefield. She chose her weapons, and she made clear that lies about her integrity would not stand. Karl Lagerfeld died in 2019. The conflict was never resolved. No apology was ever accepted. The real Meryl Streep. So what do we learn from all of this? First, that Meryl Streep is not the serene, above-it-all figure the public imagined. She has strong opinions. She holds grudges. She remembers when lines are crossed. She is human. Second, that her public grace was a deliberate choice. She could have fought publicly with Baldwin, with Klein, with Nicholson. She could have exposed what Hoffman did in 1979 rather than waiting decades to address it. She chose silence, not because she was passive, but because she understood power. She knew that quiet victories often last longer than loud ones. Third, that the film industry we romanticize has always been a battlefield. Method actors who believe their art justifies any behavior. Studios who protect profitable men at the expense of vulnerable women. Critics who reward inherited privilege over earned achievement. Awards that measure marketing as much as merit. Streep survived all of it. She did not just survive, she dominated. 21 Oscar nominations, a career that redefined what actresses could achieve. Respect that transcended the petty politics of Hollywood. But survival came at a cost. Trust, once broken, stays broken. Collaborations that could have produced masterpieces never happened. Relationships that could have been meaningful remained merely professional. The image Meryl Streep protected for 50 years was not a lie. It was armor, and now, finally, we understand why she needed it. The next time you watch one of her performances, remember what it cost. Remember the battles fought in silence. Remember the lines crossed and never forgiven. Remember that behind every flawless take was a woman who refused to let anyone break her. That is not just acting, that is survival. And perhaps that is the greatest performance of all. Not any single role, not any single film, but the sustained act of navigating an industry designed to destroy people like her. She absorbed the slaps, both literal and figurative. She endured the dismissals. She outlasted the gatekeepers. And she emerged not just intact, but legendary. The silent wars of Meryl Streep are finally known. And knowing them makes her achievement not smaller, but infinitely larger. Which conflict surprised you the most? Please share in the comments below.